Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am also known as the Grave Woman, and today I am answering 3 of your funeral service related questions. This is your first time here on the channel. I want to go on ahead and ask that you hit the subscription button below. Also like this video and share this and any other content on the channel that you feel is interesting, insightful, or helpful with at least 3 people. Our first question comes from Marcus McCaleb. I hope I said that correctly. And his question reads, I understand that the body stiffens somewhat as a result of embalming, but how stiff does the body actually get? I have observed while viewing a deceased person that they appear to be rigid, but even with my grandfather, I didn't try to move his arm or hand, but I am curious to know if it would have been possible to do that. Does the degree of stiffening depend on factors that you control during the embalming process? Even my dad, a couple of years ago, we changed his clothes between the viewing and the funeral to put on his preaching robe. He was a pastor, and I was not in the mind frame to ask, but I wondered, how did they do that? Was it hard to move his limbs to change his clothes? And if the body is not very rigid, how is it that you move the casket around like you do and the body never falls out of position inside of the casket? Okay, those are a lot of questions, so let me try to answer these one by one. First question is, how stiff does the body get during embalming? Stiff is a good word. We'll go with that word. But the degree of stiffness that is achieved during embalming is somewhat dependent upon things that we do control in the embalming process, one of them being the index of the fluids. The stiffening of the body is caused by the actual formaldehyde. Now, formaldehyde is a gas, and for the sake of embalming, we use embalming fluid, which is a liquid version of formaldehyde, right? And there's other components to what is inside of embalming fluid, but the index of embalming fluid is the actual concentration of formaldehyde in an embalming solution or the embalming fluid. So the higher the index of formaldehyde in the solution, the more stiff the body is going to be. Formaldehyde is a gas, and what that means is it's going to firm the tissues. Let's use the word firming instead of stiffening. That's the word I was thinking of. The amount of formaldehyde in a solution is going to determine how firm a body is. Now, are the limbs, let's go to the second part of your question. Are the limbs able to be moved? Yes. The body of a decedent is not stiff as a board or as firm as a brick, so to speak. Now, there are some cases, like with medical embalming, where the index and amount of formaldehyde that is placed into the solution for embalming is a lot higher, because for medical embalming, they are trying to preserve these bodies for a very extended period of time. Like the traveling show bodies, that is a different strength of formaldehyde formula or embalming fluid that is used for those bodies. Not saying that we aren't trying to preserve the bodies for a very long time either. It's just that those bodies aren't going to be inside of a casket or a vault. They're going to be out in the open air, so they require more of a firming and preservative agent. The index or strength of the preservative solution is also going to be selected and determined by what is going on within the deceased body. There's also a difference in the level of index between the solution used for arterial embalming and for cavity embalming. And the reason for that is because when we're doing cavity embalming, a lot of times we're going, or all of the time, we're going directly into the orifice of the body where there is a lot of moisture, and we are removing as much as we can with the trocar through aspiration, but we need for that embalming solution and that formaldehyde to go in and pretty much dry up everything else and dry out those cells so that there's no moisture in the body. And when I say moisture, I don't mean like wet, because embalming fluid is wet. I mean so that there is no tissue gas and things like that. So moisture, as it pertains to the inside of the body, is a totally bad thing, because it is a breeding ground for bacteria, and the bacteria that causes advanced decomposition, to be specific. So and that's basically what tissue gas is. Your third question was, is it hard to put the clothes on? And to answer your question, no, it's not. The fact that the body is a little bit firmer than your or my body would be is actually helpful when dressing and casketing the deceased. And to answer the last part of your question, how do we move the casket around and the body never falls out of position in the casket? You see just the deceased in the casket, correct? Sometimes you may see pillows and blankets and things like that, but many times there are other things that we use in the funeral home to position the body, such as arm blocks, or sometimes we use things like boxes to put the arms up on so that they don't move, or we use sometimes newspaper or other types of paper to kind of position the arms. Once the deceased is laying supine, which means, you know, they're laying on their back with their face facing up in the casket, you have to remember that the deceased is not going to move. And believe it or not, unless it's a very, very small person, and even in that case, if the person is small, there isn't much room, because we order the caskets based on the person's individual size. So there's a lot that goes in on a lot of work that goes in on the back end. And sometimes bodies do move, but hopefully your funeral director is discreet enough to reposition the body in a way and in such a discreet manner that you would not even notice what they're doing. I hope that answers your question, Marcus, and thank you for submitting it. Let's see. The next question reads, is it normal to place or to use newspaper as a buildup? My mom weighed 69 pounds at the time of death. He used newspaper to build her up so her bones wouldn't be showing through clothing. He really made a lot of mistakes, so I'm not shocked if that is not normal. And this question comes from Miss Lori Zimmerman. And I want to say, it sounds like you really weren't pleased with the level of service that you received from your funeral practitioner. So I do want to apologize that your experience was not as good as it could have been. But to answer your question, yes, it is normal to use newspaper, plastics, and other malleable materials as buildup for clothing, or to place inside of clothing to fill them out. Now, I have used newspapers before, but what I've done to eliminate the bumps and some of the noise that's caused when people touch the deceased is to sort of create a layer of cotton, or place a layer of cotton above or on top of the newspaper, so that when someone touches their loved one, they're not hearing, or they're hearing as little of that as possible. So that's something that's also done to kind of give more of a natural appearance. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, newspapers, plastics, cottons, and other shapeable materials such as foam and cardboard and things like that are used to shape clothing so that the deceased bones are not protruding, and so that clothes fit a little bit better. And our last question comes from Amberly K. And her question reads, how do you conduct yourself and the family when someone is at the service and your father now crying hysterically? Do you take their family member out, or do you just try to comfort them right there near the best way that you know how? And I think what you're trying to ask is, how do we console hysterical family members? And it all really just depends. It depends on what the situation is. Are they presenting a danger to themselves, or possibly flailing around or behaving in a way where we have absolutely no control whatsoever? It depends on who it is that's doing that. For example, if it's the child or the spouse of the deceased and there are other visitors, we may ask the other visitors to leave the room so that the spouse or the parent or whoever can have a moment to themselves with the deceased to collect themselves. There have been situations where I've had to forcefully escort people out of arrangement conferences, wakes, viewings, funerals, but those are far and few between. Most of the time, a family member will intercede before the actual funeral professional has to help calm and comfort the individual. We also have what are called quiet rooms or peace rooms, where people who are overcome with emotions can be led to have a moment to themselves. I personally like to give people the freedom to express themselves, as long as they're not causing a threat or danger to themselves or others. It's not funny, but I have had situations where people have almost knocked the casket over because they've been so overcome with emotion and grief. So in those situations, it is our job to kind of step in. And if you notice, when you attend funerals, most times when the casket's open, you will always see an attendant on either side of the casket standing there. And that is to not only to protect the deceased, but to protect the funeral goers who may become overwhelmed with emotion. Thank you so much for your question. I hope this may have answered some questions for you guys that are watching. You can always send me questions directly to thegravewoman@gmail.com. I try to read all of the comments and sometimes answer below, so you can also leave your questions there. You can find me on social media at The Grave Woman just about everywhere, and send me a direct message with your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them in video format like I've done today. Again, my name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I'm also known as The Grave Woman. Live life, love hard, and I'll see you next time.